What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Crossblades podcast, where we talk about faith, pop culture, and everything else in between. I am your host, Samek, and this is my co host, Nico. And today we're going to be talking about a topic near and dear to my heart: Westerns.
All right. Sounds good. Also, we have not done an episode for a hot minute. Actually, we've been having some things going on in our lives, so
Well,
yeah,
plus the
this
holidays and stuff, you
yeah
know.
yeah. But we're back to making episodes, and we're back on track. So we're gonna keep giving you guys some content to view.
Heck yeah, brother. So, before we get started, have you ever seen a Western?
No,
Like,
but like an actual, closest thing I've seen is like Little House on the Prairie.
that. Don't get me started on that show. That is not a Western.
I mean,
That's.
it's hey, at least it's not woke.
It was just annoying.
I had
It
it was
just got. It should have ended long before it did.
Well, true, and I think that based off of the books by Laura Ingalls, they just extended it way too long. You know what I mean?
And they, from what I hear, I have a relative who's read the books, and she said they did not stick close to them at all.
No, no. I think we read the first book for my homeschool actually, which is why we watched the show.
Okay, but not a western. Okay, so that is actually let's start the episode with that. What is a western?
Okay.
So, what is a western? So, it is a very most people think, oh, that's easy. A western is anything that takes place within the Western era. The Western era, for historical context, started about right after the Civil War, which was in the 1860s, and it ended. Some people would argue that it ended in the 1890s, but to be honest with you, there were some aspects in American history where the Old West didn't quite die out until the 1930s, actually,
Oh,
because
really?
there were some settlements and people who still lived kind of the Western way of life
Mm-hmm.
until that time.
Mm-hmm.
But as a general rule, it ended in the 19 teens, right before World War One.
All right. Interesting.
So, but were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, would A Thousand Ways to Die in the West count as a western?
Yeah, that would count.
I haven't seen it.
It's a western comedy, but yeah, it would count.
Okay, that's a movie I do want to see at some point. It was
It's definitely
advertised.
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah. It was heavily advertised at one point, and it has the guy from Agent Cody Banks in it, and Big Fat Liar. You know that guy,
No.
the main guy who's on the cover with the one iconic face. Anyone who knows what I'm talking about with Disney's Agent Cody Banks and Big Fat Liar will know who I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure that's
Okay.
it.
All I know is that Seth MacFarlane and Liam Neeson are in it. I haven't seen it yet, but
Seth
yes, that would be
MacFarlane.
considered a western.
Okay.
But Seth MacFarlane's the guy who created Family Guy.
Yeah, and didn't he do
He did
Futurama?
American Dad.
Yeah, and Futurama.
I don't think he did. I don't think he did Futurama, but he did American Dad.
Yeah, I know he did American Dad. Yeah.
We're getting off topic again.
Okay, this is what we always do. It's fine.
Yep. Anyways, but the whole point of what is a western, because there are some movies that are classified as westerns, but they're not even in America,
Hmm.
and sometimes they're not even in the 1800s. There are what people would consider modern westerns.
Mm-hmm.
So what would make a modern western? Well, the thing is very similar to other tropes, or like other genre, let me rephrase that, other genres. They have specific tropes to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's very common within Westerns is one, of course, the setting,
Mm-hmm.
which is usually late 1800s America, but that sometimes changes.
Mm-hmm.
But two, it's you have the tropes of the drifter, the lone wanderer.
Lone
You
Ranger kind
also
of
have
type, right?
essentially, yeah. Sometimes they have a sidekick like the Lone Rangers. Other times they're completely solo, like the Man with No Name. And
Okay.
at least the first movie, and the other two movies, he did get a partner. But um, there were times where it's features the lawman or the outlaw, and essentially a lot of it always has to do with this lawlessness. Because in the West, it was a very odd time in America because like I said, it was right after the Civil War, one of the most ridiculous conflicts in American history. That although yes, it did end slavery, in America, but like everything that led up to it. If you look at the history, the war really could have been avoided.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of backstabbing, cutthroat political drama afterwards that honestly this country still kind of reaps from to this day. But let's not get off on that. That's a completely different topic. But so you had these settlements where it was essentially along a lot of it was along the borders of the South or along the borders of the Mexico, essentially the areas that essentially there really wasn't any form of government.
Hmm.
So a lot of times bandits, outlaws, even former soldiers would raid settlements
Hmm.
or they would raid small towns. Small towns would be built to kind of bring civilization to that area. They would still be kind of sometimes fall victim to all the previous things I said. Plus, there were also Indian attacks. So essentially, it was an era that had a lot of bloodshed and a lot of. It was kind of a trans. It was the transition period from the old frontier life to modern America.
All right.
So that's where you get a lot of the tropes of like bounty hunters, uh, like I said, the lawmen, the marshals, the people who would take the law into their own hands. A lot of vigilantism, revenge stories, and stuff like that. Although in many aspects, yes, the Western era was a bit of a bloodbath, but in other aspects, it actually wasn't.
Hmm.
Contrary, I mean, I love Westerns, I love the tropes, but contrary to what Western media says, the whole idea of the duels, a duel at high noon, that was extremely rare.
Hmm.
What popularized that was Wild Bill Hickok. He did it like once.
Hmm.
He was, the whole point of him, he was a sharpshooter. He would have these events where he'd show you all of his cool skills and stuff like that. Well, one guy started trash talking him and saying like I could beat you, and he tried to back down, but eventually got to the point to where it escalated. So he's like, okay, fine, we're doing this, and it was not high noon, by the way. I think it was like at 5 o'clock, and he shot him at in the middle of the street and looked to the audience and said, "Are you satisfied?" And he almost got hung over that
Ouch.
because they were like, "You murdered a man," but they eventually proved that it was
He was. Yeah,
self-defense
he was throwing
because
it.
But so yeah, the whole idea of we'll duel this man to man at high noon. Yeah, if you did that, you were probably going to get hung for murder.
Probably.
It happened very rarely, and the whole trope of like Dodge City being it's funny they always pick Dodge, but in all the movies, it's like Dodge City, we're getting the heck out of Dodge. Da, 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 da. Although Dodge City was a bit of a crap show, in all these movies, especially the TV show Gunsmoke, there was because Gunsmoke ran for almost 20 years. It was one of the longest shows, and there was a shootout in every episode. So it's like actually, I think in was it the span of 10 years, there were only 4 people murdered in Dodge City.
Okay.
So yeah, so like I said, there in some instances, yes, the Western era had a lot of lawlessness. It had bloodshed. There were horrific aspects of the Western history, but a lot of it is definitely romanticized and embellished for story,
Hmm.
which you find that in every aspect of storytelling.
Hmm.
There's all kinds of misconceptions around the samurai, around the knights, the pirates,
Hmm.
and all that stuff.
One Piece is a good
But
example.
well, I'll give One Piece.
Go
Uh,
again.
I'll let that one go because that's a fantasy.
Okay.
That is a straight up fantasy. That's not supposed. It's not trying to be realistic at all.
Okay. Okay. Then in terms of pirates, I know it's off topic, but just hear me out. Just trying to understand. In terms of pirates, would Pirates of the Caribbean be in that regard, in that same trope?
Oh, absolutely. That had a lot of fantasy elements to it.
Yeah, but it's over romanticized, as you said, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, just trying to connect the dots here.
Yeah. But like because the why westerns are so important especially to me as a writer, is because the cowboy is essentially how you have Europe has the knights,
Mhm.
Japan has the samurai, the seas had the pirates, America had the cowboy.
Uh,
That's
America.
America. Yeah. But yeah, no, seriously, that's what the cowboy was to American culture.
Oh
Because
yeah,
despite what people want to say nowadays, America does have culture.
yeah, we do.
So tired of hearing that crap. Anyways, um, go ahead, cancel me, call me racist. I don't care. But we white people have culture.
Yeah, we do.
We all have culture. Every nation, every tribe has a culture.
Yeah.
But so what is interesting about the cowboy though is very similar to the knight. There are a lot of misconceptions of what a cowboy is. So when people think a knight, they think a person in shining armor. When in actual reality, a knight was a cavalryman. Yes, he had this awesome shining armor, but he was a mounted warrior.
Hmm.
In most depictions of knights, you don't ever really see the mount.
Yeah, you see the halberd, the armor, the
You know, they're usually
chainmail.
foot soldier. They're usually foot soldiers
Yeah, they don't
whenever
have
you
a.
see a knight.
Yeah, but most knights nowadays aren't they on horseback?
No, just no, no. Like modern day terms of knights, when you see it in media, they're foot soldiers. When in actual reality, they were mounted on horses.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. So, where and same thing with the samurai. A lot of people just see the armor and the swords, when in actual reality, the samurai were also lords who owned land and owned servants, but their main weapon was actually a bow.
Hmm.
Uh, and with the cowboy, what do you think when you envision a cowboy?
Guy with a horse, land, a gun, and or at least a way to defend himself, and a pretty sturdy man. You know what I'm saying? Like this, like a man who's worked his. I hate to say it, but almost like a redneck.
Well, I mean, a lot of them were, but cowboy. The whole point of cowboys was they were cattlemen. They were cattle herders.
Ah, makes sense.
That was the whole point of cowboys, which and a lot when the people think of a cowboy, they always almost forget the cows involved.
Yeah, the cattle, the the
Yeah.
the not just cattle, but also their livestock.
Yeah, so well, that's what essentially cattle were. So what historically what a cowboy was, where they were a group of men who herded cattle, and of course, they owned all kinds of land, and they would essentially cross the cattle from one area to the next.
Yep.
So one, so they could graze, but two, they could get them into town, so that way they could sell either the full heads of cattle, or sometimes they could sell the meat, they could sell the leather,
Hmm.
and there were quite a few times where not only you had to deal with Indians or with the wildlife, a lot of times you had to deal with other cowboys,
Okay.
because there were sometimes small wars over land, and there was even an entire war over the land because the cowmen wanted to have their cow grazing here, but the sheepmen also wanted their sheep to graze there. And the thing about sheep is when they graze, they completely tear it up from the roots.
Yeah, well,
So,
cows just get the base head of it, right?
yeah, so there was a time where you literally had cowmen and sheepmen literally killing each other because they wanted that particular land.
Okay. Just one quick question though, and I'm forgive me, but I'm just trying to have some clarity here. By Indians, you mean Native Americans, correct?
Well, yes, I know nowadays that's the politically correct term, but
I'm
back
not trying to
then
be
that's
politically
I
correct. I'm
know
just
that back then that's what they were called.
okay. Okay.
So I'm not being racist when I call
No.
them Indians. Just historically, that's what they were called.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to piss off some people, but India was originally called Hindustan.
Oh. Okay.
You find old maps, it's called Hindustan, and they were called Hindus.
Hmm.
India is actually that's more of a modern term,
Hmm.
which find interesting. Quite haven't figured out. I haven't pinpointed when that happened exactly,
Hmm.
but yeah, originally the Native Americans were called Indians,
Yeah,
and
because
they
of
were not
Christopher
called
Columbus.
Indians. Yeah, and Christopher Columbus didn't call them Indians because he thought they were from India. No, that's a misconception because, like I said, India was called Hindustan.
Yeah.
But anyways, so whenever you hear me say Indian in this podcast, I'm just referring to the Native Americans and the historical term.
Yeah.
Of course, they called them Indians,
Which is way worse.
which is yeah. But anyways, um, but yeah, so the modern idea of a cowboy is a little bit different than what the historical cowboy was. And here's the thing, though, another little tidbit of fun: they did not wear these.
How ironic you're
The
wearing one
idea
though.
No, I know. It's just the whole idea of this being a cowboy hat. This is not a cowboy hat. It wasn't until I believe the late 1800s, more like the 1880s, 90s, where they actually started wearing these because they became fashionable. Originally, they wore bowler hats. Bowler hats they were small and they were simple, easy to take care of, and that was kind of the fashion back then. Essentially, if you don't know what a bowler hat is, it has a round top and a very thin brim.
Hmm.
Uh, I
I'll
forget
put a
his name.
picture up on the
The
screen.
big mustache guy in Captain America: The First Avenger. Do you remember him?
No, but I'll
The one
find a
played by
picture
Neil
of that.
McDonald. Essentially, the hat he wore, that's a bowler hat. Anyways, um, I forget his name. Crap, I hadn't seen that movie in forever, so I don't know. But anyways, uh, so it wasn't until Wild Bill Hickok and other It wasn't until Wild Bill Hickok and other prominent figures started wearing hats like these. And originally, you see how there's kind of a dip
Hmm.
and a crease in this. Well, originally, it was just kind of round, and people would kind of make the creases however they wanted.
Hmm.
Uh, but because Wild Bill Hickok wore, okay, well now we gotta wear it to look cool. People were influenced back then too, just like we are now with pop culture.
Yeah.
Like they had pop culture back then. You had legends and you had romanticized versions of these people literally during that time. It didn't take 100 years for us to get the romanticized version of the West. They were literally writing those versions of the West in the West while it was happening because it sold. They were essentially you would get these people either in that era and just would write stories, or people that would come from the East in the cities and they would see all this stuff and be like, wow, this is a whole new world. And they would take what little experience they had and just come up with this big story. And the folks in the cities, they loved it. They're like, oh, this is awesome. So yeah, a lot of the tropes literally came from that time.
I see.
But just like the hat got so popular for creases. Now they just put the crease in themselves. But yeah, so a lot of the tropes that I love about the West is whether it be the drifter, the lawman, the bounty hunter, or even the outlaw trying to become someone greater. A lot of it has to do with real masculinity.
Hmm.
This idea of you're put in this bad situation, and instead of whining about it, you're going to stand up, you're going to rise to the occasion, and you're going to fight for what's right. You're going to protect others. A lot of times, in a lot of stories, they got the girl in the end.
Hmm.
A lot of it had to do with men raising families in this frontier, biting their gritting their teeth, biting their tongue through the hard ways of life, but they're like, no, I'm gonna keep pushing on for my family. And a lot of it was the complete opposite of this modern nihilistic viewpoint of manhood, where it was all about me, myself, and I,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna get what I want, and I don't care about anybody else. And a lot of Western stories, it would start out that way, but then as he meets new people or even meets a girl he likes, he begins to peel away his selfishness and begins to sacrifice for these people. And it just it just has, especially like books written by Louis L'Amour.
Hmm.
Louis L'Amour is one of the like quintessential writers of the Western genre. He kind of, I mean, he already took some existing tropes, but he kind of like redefined the genre.
Okay.
I actually have me and my family, we have the entire collection, leatherbound edition. He wrote over like 100 books.
Oh wow.
Well, most of them were westerns, but there were some spy thrillers, some swashbuckling and stuff. He wrote in different genres, but it was mainly westerns.
Okay.
But it's kind of interesting. It did take him a while to rise to fame. It wasn't until he was in his 50s that he really became a prominent figure. And to be honest with you, he actually gained more popularity after his death.
It sounds like a little bit like Edgar Allan Poe and also the J.R.R. Tolkien,
Yeah, exactly.
which is why I
But
tell
yeah,
you not to get discouraged with your writing in your 20s.
well, true. But he wrote a lot of his stories had to do with essentially how, like, the Men's of Fiction podcast
Hmm.
by Nathaniel Hummel and Luke Goodrich. Great podcast. I highly recommend it. They kind of somewhat inspired this podcast too,
Yeah.
but they love talking about the Western genre. Um, I would highly recommend watching them. But like they said before, the whole point of Louis L'Amour is it's like if you wanted to give a book to a young man, because stories are something, like I've said before, that can inspire and be like, people could read these books and be like, well, if this character can go through all of this and rise to the occasion, why can't I?
Hmm.
Because storytelling has that effect on people. Look at pop culture. People are affected by the stories they read, they watch, and they consume. Louis L'Amour would be the quintessential stories to give to a young man because there are so many good lessons of morality and manhood in his books.
Oh, I believe that. Check them out when I see you. Anyways, um, I think I know a few restaurants that I've actually read. So actually, if based on the what you've been talking about, I think I know a few. Have you ever heard of Little Britches? Little Britches.
I've heard of it. I just haven't read it.
Yeah, it's. I think that's set in that time period. It's about a boy growing up to be a man. And he has to become the man of the house and all that stuff. The same thing with Old Yeller. I've read that book. Old Yeller technically is a western in my opinion. Technically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would count.
But can you guess what my favorite western is? Technically,
But
you're gonna probably say no, that's not western. But trust me, it is. Zombie Powder.
no, that actually would be classified as a western.
Did you look into it?
That would be more of a science fiction western,
Yeah.
but yeah, that could segue into the other topic of how I was going to say a lot of the tropes that Zombie Powder has
Mm-hmm.
is what some of the other Western tropes has. Like, the idea of you have this goal and you're going to explore this wilderness.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you see that in other tropes, but like how it's a lot of it has to do with desert. There's the lawlessness. He's the wanderer.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's Gamma
a lot
Katabe.
of, and he ends up, a lot of times in westerns, the wanderer will encounter someone, and he's like, "Well, I guess you're just going to have to tag along for this, even though I really don't
Yep.
want to."
Elwood.
That's that's very common in westerns.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
it's-
read all of Zombie Powder, and let me tell you, it's a good story. It's really good.
I've read
First chapter?
the first chapter.
Yeah. What'd you think? You never told me.
It was interesting to say the least.
The fact
But
that he has a sword in a bullet-ridden world is amazing, and how he.
now uh, that's definitely inspired by like the samurai films.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I find interesting is a lot of the tropes of the samurai films are just like westerns because uh, have you heard of Akira Kurosawa?
I think so. You mentioned him once or twice.
Akira Kurosawa he was a Japanese film director,
Hmm.
and a lot of his movies were samurai films.
Ah, Yeah, yeah.
and he was heavily inspired by American westerns.
Ah,
And American westerns were also very heavily inspired by him, so much so to the point that there were other westerns that started copying his movies.
hmm.
Now, Sergio Leone, who was Italian, if you ever hear the term spaghetti western, that means it's a western movie made in Italy.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what started spaghetti, where the term came from, but that's what it means.
That's
So,
hilarious.
yeah, so Sergio Leone, he created The Man with No Name.
Okay.
A Fistful of Dollars. He made that movie. Well, turns out it was a complete rip-off of Akira Kurosawa's film Yojimbo. It was literally a Western copy and paste of this movie.
Gotta hand it to people.
So yeah, Clint Eastwood literally got his career started on a ripoff.
Wow.
So yeah, so Yojimbo, it's like I said, it's literally pretty much the exact same story. It's just samurai, so Western. Um, so Akira Kurosawa actually sued him
Really?
and got some money out of it because he's like, if you're going to rip off my stuff, you could at least give me credit for it.
Yeah, just say I was inspired by this.
Because he was actually open to the idea of westerns being patterned off of some of his work because one of his most popular films, Seven Samurai,
Hmm.
uh, there was an American version called The Magnificent Seven,
Hmm.
and it was a bunch of gunslingers in the Old West,
Hmm.
and he actually approved of it because they said inspired based on Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai.
Hmm.
But anyways, so it was interesting how the samurai films and the western films kind of bled off each other.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, like they had some of the similar tropes of the lawlessness and the wanderer and stuff like that. Like some of the tropes you see in westerns do pop up in other genres, but when you know western is so unique because when you see a western, you know it's a western, even if it's not in America, even if it's set in modern
Zombie
day.
Rider, for
You just
example. I hate to say it again, but
or
exactly.
The Mandalorian
Yeah,
even would
yeah,
at least the first season would be classified as a western.
yeah.
Cowboy Bebop, even though that's very noir, it has a lot of western elements to it.
Hmm.
People call that like a space western. Even I would even argue to say that not necessarily the others, but the very first Star Wars movie, I would
New Hope.
argue,
Yeah.
yeah, A New Hope. I mean, they was originally just called Star Wars, but anyways, I would even argue that that would be a space western
Yeah. I can see that.
because it has a lot of tropes from the western genre.
Hmm.
Now, interestingly, uh, A New Hope was actually loosely based on Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress.
Hmm. Okay. Is that why
And
the
when
Death
you,
Star and all that was existing?
well, not the Death Star, but like, if you watch the movie, you can see the parallels between the two.
Okay.
Um, although I will say Hidden Fortress is a bit of a slow burn, but it was still a pretty good movie. But anyways,
You could argue
uh,
that the Star Wars films are and Lord of the Rings are slow burns too.
to some people, yeah, but to me, I mean, I actually literally right before filming this podcast, I just watched the extended cut of Fellowship of the Ring again, and I'm
That's
just
a
grinning
slow
ear to
burn
ear.
if I've ever seen one. I watched the
I don't,
theatrical version, okay?
I don't think it's a slow burn. I think it's awesome.
No, no, I mean slow burn as in it takes like it's like a 4 hour movie, you know?
Well, okay, just because a movie is long, it doesn't mean it's a slow burn. Slow burn means it's very slow, a slow paced movie. Slow
Oh,
burn is pacing.
uh,
Like, have you ever felt like let me put it to you this way. Have you ever watched an hour and a half movie and you felt like it was 3 hours long?
yeah, yeah.
That's a slow burn.
Okay, okay. So movie I haven't
Although
really felt that way.
there are some movies where I feel like the slow burn works and
Hmm.
it's enjoyable, but there are some films that I'm like, oh dear God, can we just please move on?
Yeah.
Sergei Leone, my brother, is probably gonna kick my ass over this one, but so my older brother Aaron, he loves Sergio Leone's movies.
Yeah.
He absolutely loves them.
Hmm.
I think they're just okay at best.
Hmm.
I definitely see the influence they had on westerns. They're very well made movies. His favorite is Once Upon a Time in the West.
Uh,
That movie is almost 3 hours long, and I swear it felt like 5 hours long.
yeah.
Because there were so many times in the movie where they're just standing there doing nothing,
Mhm.
or the conversations are going on too long, and there's some times where I just felt like they really needed to get a move on with it.
Yeah.
Like, I respect it. I mean, the beginning scene was really cool, and the final shootout, I would argue, is one of the greatest shootouts, well, like duels, I guess you say, in cinema. The way that story is told is just, it was chef's kiss. But as a whole, I felt like the movie was very, it was like, okay, 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 she's been staring at herself in the mirror for like 50 years now. Can we please move on? I'm not joking. There's really one part where she's just staring at herself in the mirror. I'm like, okay, we can move on. But
They're like dramatic effect.
I mean, like I said, he was one of those people, he liked to dwell on things to kind of set the mood and set the tone.
Mhm.
But his films weren't for everybody. Like I said, I greatly respect them. I just kind of felt like he took too long.
Mhm.
But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that everybody wants to hail as like the greatest Western ever.
Mhm.
That was another problem I had with it. I felt like they lingered too long.
Mhm.
And I felt like the middle of the movie, you literally could have just removed that, and then the movie would have literally been the same.
Okay, I have to bring
But
this up real quick because
but
there's a small tiny parody in reference to that movie in a old CD-ROM game I used to play as a kid called Freddy Fish. Okay, and just hear me out. Just hear me out.
okay.
So in this little cutscene you see, because you go to a little like a little video player in the area you're in, and it says the good, shows the sheriff with the fish, the bad, tumbleweed. Then a whale crashes down on both of them. The heavy.
Okay, that's awesome. Oh, you do know that the opening of Ratatouille was also a reference to The Good and the Bad and the Ugly.
It is.
You know when he
Explain.
jumps out the window and it stops,
Oh, this
and The Good and the
is
Bad,
me.
yeah, and the Good and the Bad and the ugly jumps out of the window, and then it goes the ugly.
Oh, I see. That's funny. It's like this
Yeah, so
is me. I think as a
me.
parent, I need to change my life a little bit. I mean, I love good food, but good food is hard for a rat to find. It wouldn't be so hard to find if you weren't so picky. I don't want to eat garbage, Dad. Sorry, I that's from the trailer, but that's how
I
the movie
know.
starts out at the beginning.
Yeah, no, I know. But
The fact that I know that my
we
heart
need
is
to we need to
scared.
do it. We need to do a Pixar episode.
Yeah, we do. We need to have an
Uh,
episode of just for Disney in general, in my opinion. Good.
that episode could go dark really quick. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, I know some dark facts about Disney, good sir.
Speaking of Western, speaking of Western,
Mhm.
uh, we need to get a Woody movie.
Yeah. Well, that's actually good because Buzz
Yeah,
Lightyear got two movies, in fact, and an animated
I I
series.
I actually saw the first animated movie, A Buzz Lightyear. It was fun. You
Hmm.
know, it was a directed DVD movie, but it was all right.
Yeah.
But I heard that the recent one kind of sucked. They completely changed the canon
What?
of already established lore. But anyways,
The 3D one? That one's woke as frick, man.
that's what I mean. They that one was bad, and they not only was woke, they changed the canon of things that were already established about the character. But anyways, we're getting off topic. I'm just saying, it's like, I think it would be so cool to have a Western movie of Woody.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
we got a taste of it in Toy Story 3, which was amazing.
well, no, you mean Toy Story 2 with Woody's Roundup.
No, Toy Story 3, the beginning of it. with
Oh yeah. Okay, I
I
know
know
what you
it's
mean.
I know it's outlandish and stuff because it's Andy's imagination, but still, it's good. It's good.
No, I want a movie of that too.
Yeah,
Like, honestly, I would love just a good old like take the awesome tropes of a western and make a Woody movie out of it,
yeah, and have Tom
and
Hanks do
then
the voicing.
yeah, and just make a just a great western, and then have like a post and have it end with like Buzz Lightyear crash landing.
That'd be hilarious.
And then you could just like make a bunch of movies based off Andy's imagination, like we get like the beginning scene of Toy Story 3. That would just be like, oh man, that would be so epic.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I'm
Okay.
just saying, yeah, considering it's Disney, they probably wouldn't do it. And if they did, they'd probably make it suck. So,
Probably
anyways,
based
but
off track record.
what I find so interesting about the Western genre is um a lot of the faces of Westerns,
Mm-hmm.
because the Western genre in film was honestly how modern day is with superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Western was.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have superheroes were exclusively comics
Yeah.
at the time, and a lot of people considered comics to be childish. We kind of talked about the history of comics in our episode with Classics Comics,
Yeah.
but so how the Western genre got big
Mm-hmm.
was essentially, like I said, it was big in its time,
Yeah.
but right before World War One and during World War One, more like adventure and exploration uh, genres were popular,
Mm-hmm.
because it was about, because the West was about, well, exploring here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this point, we had already explored the West.
Uh-huh.
So now it's like, okay, well, where else can we go? So characters like Alan Quatermain of King Solomon's Mines, he became really popular during that time. It was a lot of exploring Africa or Asia or Europe, or like the undiscovered, uncharted areas. But
Indiana Jones.
World War, yeah, essentially, Indiana Jones was heavily inspired by the pulp adventure of that time.
Yeah.
He was essentially the love letter to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but World War One happens,
Mm-hmm.
and well, our soldiers get to experience that. They went over to Europe, they went over to Africa, and in World War Two, they also went to Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there were actually battles in Africa. Interestingly, not many people talk about that. There was an entire war in the northern Africa, but anyway, and even in the end, especially in World War One, there was a huge thing in the Middle East against the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to live their dreams of exploration, and soon found out that it was not fun.
No.
They came home, and they didn't want to hear those stories anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what did writers do? They're like, well, what do we talk about? So the Western became popular again,
Mm-hmm.
because it was here, it was the comfort of this country, but it still had the exploration.
Mm-hmm.
So then John Wayne came along, and him and John Ford was the director. John Ford was essentially the Akira Kurosawa of America,
Mm-hmm.
and John Wayne was one of the most popular, if not the most popular, Western actor of all time. He came before Clint Eastwood. It was him, Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, Dean Martin, Robert Mitchum, Audie Murphy, uh, even Jimmy Stewart. They all were big Western stars, and they essentially kind of revolutionized the Westerns in film.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, it was like the rave. You knew what you were going to expect. You could walk into a movie and watch a good Western. Well, just like superheroes, it eventually got to the point to where people didn't want them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You come around the 1970s, it really started to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why movies like Tombstone in the 90s was so big, because that was about when the Western genre had died.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tombstone comes along, and it's just this absolute fantastic movie. and people are like, "Oh, westerns are good again." And for a little bit, the westerns looked like they were going to pick up, but then into the 2000, of course, in the early 2000s is when the superheroes were starting to get. I mean, the 90s and the early 2000s was more of the action movie,
Mhm.
like that was their time. But then later in the, especially from the late 2000s and 2010s on, the superhero genre came about. But what I find interesting is, oh, were you gonna say something?
Yeah. What's ironic is that Zombie Powder was actually published in 1999.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So just saying, and it ran until the end of near the end of 2000. It ran for
Oh, okay.
a whole year in Shonen Jump.
Okay. But what I find interesting is that westerns still exist.
Hmm.
Many of them exist through modern westerns, but something that always kind of puzzles me, and people wonder, it's like, well, why can't we get good westerns anymore? It's like, haven't you noticed that just like, well, honestly, with a lot of genres, but especially with modern westerns, they're just so nihilistic.
Yeah.
It's like, the Old West, it had this charm to it. It had this, yes, a bit romanticized, but it had, good versus evil. It had the hero. It was about, being a man against incredible odds. It had all of these unique, the lawmen, the outlaws, the bounty hunters, and now it's just like a lot of modern day westerns. When I say modern day westerns, I mean western films made nowadays, not necessarily just movies that are set in modern day.
Yeah.
Um, they're always just so bleak.
Hmm.
They're just like everything sucks. There's no good. There's no good. It's all bad. Uh, the main characters are usually morally gray, was put in this absolute dark setting. And like, don't go get me wrong, there's always been dark settings in westerns. There has always been a little touch of nihilism, but there was always
A glimmer of
still
hope.
a glimmer of hope and a glimmer of good present.
Hmm.
And now it's like they've shifted away from that.
Yeah. Like, how do I put this? I'm gonna go back to Zombie Powder because it's my favorite thing. I'm sorry. Uh,
I need to show you some more westerns,
yeah,
dude.
we're gonna. Don't worry. We got we got time.
Oh yeah.
So the thing is that with Zombie Powder with Gamma Akutabe, that's probably Gamma Akutabe. Yeah, that's how you say his name. And Elwood, for example, they Gamma's original motive in the entire thing is self-centered because it's like because in the first chapter, spoilers, Elwood's sister is shot in the back of the head by a gang member, by the leader of the gang called King Cuero, I believe. And you read the first chapter, so you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
so with that, he needs these rings of the dead. That's the entire premise of the story. There are these rings called the rings of the dead, which can either make the person who wields them immortal or bring life to the dead. So Elwood's goal is to revive his sister and bring her back to full health because her original problem was that she had a heart condition. So he kind of put her out of his misery, but regardless, it was still murder. Um, but Gamma's whole entire premise of his original character in the first few chapters is that he wants to be immortal and use the rings of the dead basically to rule the world. He's like, I'll be immortal, no one can kill me, and I'll do whatever the heck I want. But as time progresses, he actually is fond of Elwood as a character. He's literally his sidekick at this point. Because, as you said, the kid tags along and is thrust into this, like
Mhm.
with other stories. So, with the nihilism, I'd say Gamma as a character has a little bit of nihilism, but not too much. He's
But
still,
you see, he grows as a character. He
yeah, he
doesn't
does.
stay in that position or get worse.
No, that's my point, and that's why I'm using this story because this is what I know.
Yeah. Like, I mean, yeah, this was bound to come up.
What's up?
I understand. Like I said, I mean, I write darker stories myself. I'm not saying that we need to completely get rid of nihilism or even get rid of depictions of depravity.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of tired of that is always what we're getting, and it's just constantly shoved in your face, and it's like there's no hope, there's no good. and it's like almost glamorizing nihilism.
Yeah, not
Like
personally. I
there,
think. Sorry, I want to say
no, you
this.
go ahead.
Nihilism as a concept can be used for character growth, but in real life, it'll just make you miserable.
Yeah,
So, just saying.
yeah, but like I'm going to use this for an example. There's a book called Blood Meridian.
Mm-hmm.
It is extremely depraved and the epitome of nihilism, and so much so to the point to where it's called the unfilmable book. Like people wouldn't get away, wouldn't be able to film this. It's so messed up, but it's a western. But in a way, I haven't read it. I know what happens. In a way, I respect it because it's trying to. It has a goal. It's essentially showing you
Mm-hmm.
the dark side of the West because it was actually inspired by real events, is what is really baffling about this book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it also serves as a cautionary tale to it's like if you essentially go looking for darkness, it will consume you and then it will destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
Like so but I personally wouldn't written it as depraved as it was, but that's what he decided to do. But like I said, there's a time and a place for stories like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, to serve as a cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like I said earlier, we are the stories that we consume.
Mm-hmm.
We the more we consume things, we will be affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
It's no it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. I mean, I still have people argue with me about this.
Mm-hmm.
I've posted stuff talking about how, art is a reflection of society and society is a reflection of its art.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you see it time and time again, and people will be like, no, that's not true. I'm like, yes, it is true. You
People say
look
that's
at
purity culture.
that. I'm not even wanting purity culture and
That's what they
storytelling.
say
I'm
it
not
is.
looking for, uh, I'm not looking for squeaky clean stories. Like, sure, you can have family friendly, kid friendly stories, but I'm not like one of those people who are like, we can't have violence, we can't have language, we can't have drugs, we can't have dark moral complexity, we can't even have sexual content. I'm not saying that. I'm just like the constant promotion of these things,
Yeah.
the glamorization. Almost, it's like when the Bible said they make good evil and evil good.
Mm-hmm.
You see that a lot within society.
Yeah.
And a lot of the westerns that have been coming out, although they be very few because there's really not that many made, but a lot of them are like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly think it's like if we want to bring back the western genre, which I really think it needs to make a comeback,
Yeah.
it's like we need to look to the way they were originally. Yes, you had your darker ones. Yes, you had there were some old movies I watched where the characters were absolute assholes
Mm-hmm.
and were self-centered, but as a whole, the genre was about strong masculine men fighting against odds, starting a family, getting the girl, getting their goals, and helping the people around them.
Mm-hmm. Which we've kind of lost, which is a
Yeah,
shame.
yeah. That's one of the reasons why I love John Wayne is yes, yes, he's pretty much the same character in every movie, with a few exceptions, but he just brings this awesome authority in his movies, and it's like you know what you're gonna get in this movie.
Yeah.
You're just, he just had this vibe. He was just awesome. The men were men, the women were women. It's like, there was a goal, there was something to strive for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, interestingly, the Western had a lot of the Western tropes have bled into more modern tropes. Like I said, how Star Wars is a bit of a Western, how you mentioned that zombie powder is a bit of a Western. Um, but yeah, it's like even some horror films like Assault on Precinct 13, that was actually inspired by Rio Bravo.
Okay.
So, yeah, the Western has had a massive impact on our pop culture and our storytelling. Because, like I said, even though the Western genre doesn't really do much anymore. You can see its tropes and its effects on other genres,
Yeah.
including even superheroes.
Yeah.
Because we really stop and think about it, what were superheroes originally?
Whatever, like the man who rose up to the task, basically.
Well, crime fighters.
Yeah.
And that's essentially kind of what the West was. It was a lot of vigilantism or, the lawman fighting against outlaws.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the last thing I want to talk about before I give it to you.
Mhm.
That is one bone to pick I have with Red Dead Redemption.
Mm.
I played the very first Red Dead Revolver. It's a dated game, but I liked what it was going for. He was a bounty hunter looking for revenge. Had a pretty epic ending too. I honestly wish they would remake that one. But Red Dead Redemption comes out. I haven't played the second one yet. I've only played the first one.
Mm.
I enjoyed it, but it worked. I feel like it worked with the first one. I know the story of the second one. I haven't fully played it yet, but I know the story, how it works. I really have a bone to pick with the second one, especially because, well, for starters, I think it set the bar way too high on video games
Mm.
because there were so many tiny little details in there that people loved, to where nowadays that when a game with, only quarter of the budget, when it doesn't have a freaking horse's ball shrink and winter, people want to be like, it's not realistic enough. And I'm like, that's not what
Or
video
if you
games
shoot,
are meant
or
to
if you
be.
shoot a fence, you can actually see the wood splintering.
Yeah, and I'm like, video game is like that's not video games aren't supposed to be, 100% realistic. It's like this game took 8 years and $500 million to make.
Yeah.
It's like not all games have that budget. But anyways, not only there's that, I honestly feel like, well, also, and nowadays, if another Western game would come out, people would bash it, calling it a Red Dead Redemption ripoff.
Mm.
Honestly, the Red Dead Redemption fan base is honestly kind of toxic, in my opinion.
Mm.
But what really kind of pisses me off about it is everybody wants to praise Arthur Morgan as the greatest video game character, and I'm like, he's a piece of shit.
At least you're.
He literally is a murderous outlaw who last minute decides, oh, I guess I'm going to be a good guy because now I've got tuberculosis. And literally right before he dies, he already commits a bunch of crimes. And of course, you as the player have the option of being a murderous prick, but the game still treats him as, oh, he's this hero. It's like, no.
Okay. Okay. Compare him to Gamma Akutabe for a second here, okay? Gamma Akutabe in Zombie Powder is the exact opposite, in my opinion. Like, he does what Justice does, you know what I'm saying? But he
Mhm.
doesn't. He actually did in the second chapter. You probably haven't seen it, I don't think. But in the second chapter, he does give a guy who puts a gun to Elwood's head. He does give him a warning by throwing his chainsaw sword at his hand and cutting off like two of his fingers and says, "Hey, hey, hey, leave him alone, or you're gonna have a problem with me." He says he gives him a chance to walk away, but he's like, "No, I'm not going to. I'm gonna kill the kid." But no, then he's like, "Okay," cuts him in half. You know what I'm saying? That is heroic, okay, and that is well deserved because of the
Yeah.
situation. It's self-defense and trying to save Elwood. What
Yeah.
you're saying is that he has no redemption arc at all.
Yeah, it's like they want like Red Dead Redemption, and in my opinion, which I'm not the only person who feels this way, there's some other people feel this way. It's like in the first game, which is takes place after the second one, because the second one's more of a prequel.
Yeah.
John Marston actually has a redemption arc. He was part of this outlaw gang, but he was like, after all this crap that happened, he left the gang and it's like, I'm not doing this. I have a wife, I have a son. We're going to live a normal life.
Yeah, and that stuff
And
follows
then
you is the problem.
but his past ends up catching up with him,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
the Pinkertons force him to hunt the remaining members of the outlaw gang.
Mm-hmm.
So or they say, or we'll kill your wife and son.
Yeah,
And so he goes, he takes care of them. If you think it's finally over, well then they all come back and then they kill him.
Oh Oh boy.
And then at the end of the game, you play as his son,
And
and
his
his
son
son
is in the
goes.
prequel.
No, his son appears in the prequel,
Okay.
but yeah, at the end of at the end of it, his son's fully grown, and he goes and gets revenge.
Ah, gotcha.
And but the second one, which is technically before, um, it's literally just kind of
A cluster duck.
you're just you're a bunch of outlaws who end up murdering a bunch of innocent people in the beginning because your leader went batshit insane,
Mm-hmm.
and you're all starting to question whether or not it's a good idea to follow him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you're also trying to avoid the law. One of the guys, Micah, ends up ratting them out, which gets the main character Arthur killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of it, you play as John, and you kill Micah, and then you go to live off with your wife and child. And then, of course, like I said, we already know what happens to John because of the first game. But it's like, I don't
This,
get.
as I
Like I
said,
said, maybe I need a full. Maybe I really need to play it from beginning to end instead of just watching parts of it. But it's like I don't get the hype for Arthur Morgan. I'm like, this guy is a stone cold killer who gets TB, and all of a sudden, oh, I'm a good guy now because
it sounds like
whatever. It's like to me, it's like that is not the quintessential Western hero. That is not who what the Western hero is supposed to be. That's not an ideal hero. Then again, maybe that's the point. I don't know because there are films like Unforgiven, which kind of serve as the anti-Western.
mm-hmm.
Great movie, by the way. I get it. One, yes, not the ideal Western hero, but it was trying to make a point. Maybe that's what Red Dead Redemption's doing. But I honestly kind of feel like not really. They're trying to paint a good guy as a bad guy. Which I mean, then again, this is Rockstar. They made GTA for goodness sake.
And
So
we all know how bad GTA is.
I mean, I get it. It's edgy. You get to play the criminal, but I'm sorry if it's literally an objective to where hey, let's kill as many cops as possible and kill as many innocent people as possible. I'm sorry. I no.
Okay, let's rave on. Okay, if we want to compare games or Western stories, let's compare Evil West to Red Dead. Okay, Evil West was good.
Yeah.
And let's explain why, for those who don't know, because we've talked about Evil West before. But yeah, that was one of our favorite video games in our
Definitely
favorites
more
episode.
of a steampunk Western fantasy than just a Western, but it's still definitely a Western.
Oh yeah, that game was so much
We need
fun.
to play that again.
Yeah, at some point, because oh my gosh, was it fun.
Uh huh.
But you're it's a good versus evil story, and good
Hmm.
triumphs over evil in that story. There are and there's also wasn't it the mayor who was corrupt, right?
It was well, I think one of the mayors were corrupt, but it was a guy within the agency
Yeah,
who was overseer of the operation.
yeah, and you find out he's working for the vampires, right? They're vampires.
But yeah, he wasn't necessarily working for them. He was just kind of had his own little agenda.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking of something at the end
Yeah.
that I won't spoil for the audience.
Yeah, we're not gonna spoil it, but good. But I prefer Evil West over Red Dead any day. Just saying.
I mean,
I might be biased.
me, I wouldn't say that's fair because they are two completely different games.
Mm-hmm.
Evil West is the epitome of the overpowered video game hero.
Uh-huh.
Like you're literally punching people 6 feet up in the air. You got a gauntlet with all this electricity stuff. Whereas Red Dead Redemption is a more realistic game.
Right, that's fair. I'm
So,
probably biased.
I mean, let me put it this way: I like Evil West's gameplay better, but the first Red Dead Redemption I feel like had a better story than Evil West.
That's a fair take.
Because I mean, Evil West was just trying to be fun and goofy, and it just completely owned it. Whereas the first Red Dead Redemption was like, hey, here's an actual story.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I know I'm kind of giving shade to the second one. Maybe I need a full. Like I said, I'm going to eventually fully play it, and then I'll give an updated opinion.
Yeah.
But the opinion I have right now is Arthur Morgan is not the ideal hero in any story.
Yeah. But if I was going to compare two games, like, if we're going to, since you're talking about Red Dead and Evil West is more similar to Serious Sam, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's more bonkers, just fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you guys who don't know what Serious Sam is, it's a ripoff of like Doom and Quake and all those boomer shooters where blood and gore spraying everywhere. You're shooting up aliens and monsters and stuff. It's fun.
And it's also kind of a parody of like 80s action movies and 90s science fiction.
Yeah.
Like there were quite a few Stargate references I saw in there,
Yeah,
but in the
makes
like the
no
Mummy and stuff
sense, but
like
it's hilarious.
it's stupid, but it's awesome. But yeah, like once again, we're off topic.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. But yeah, like, have I made any sense to why? I feel like I've just rambled on and on. Have I made any sense of why the Westerns are iconic?
You have, in my opinion.
Okay.
You have.
Okay. But yeah, because like I said earlier, Europe had the knights,
Mhm.
Japan had the samurai,
Yep.
the sea had the pirates,
Yep.
America had the Western, the cowboys, the outlaws.
Yep.
And another, I think I need to wrap it up. So I think one of the reasons why I think Westerns would be so relevant nowadays
Mhm.
is look at just the lawlessness within our country right now.
Mhm.
There is so much political corruption, so much corruption with businessmen. Judges are letting criminals like free over and over. You have like these career criminals that are literally arrested and let go over 14 times. One guy was like 40, but under the same judge.
Mhm.
You know, we have a specific list
Mhm.
that people keep talking about, but we don't ever get the full list, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And people want to see justice. People want to see someone rise up and take the law into their own hands. And that's essentially what the West was for a time. It was like there were times where there was no law, or the law was corrupt, or the law was too scared to do something.
Mhm.
So a man would take up his guns and he would fight for the people. He would fight for what was right. Sometimes he would be selfish and fight for himself. But needless to say, he went against corruption.
Mhm.
And I really think that now is the time for Westerns to really make an epic comeback.
Mhm.
Not just because of that reason, but we need some heroes. And I don't mean just superheroes, because let's just be honest, we're all kind of tired of the whole superhero genre. That just kind of needs to. Avengers Doomsday needs to come out, and then they just need to stop after that. But I'm like, I feel like we need more heroic figures that men of all ages can look up to and use them as a role model.
Mhm. I 100% agree, and we'll talk more about this, one-on-one offside the podcast. But you have hit the nail on the head, my friend.
Mm-hmm. And for all of you, like, well, what Western movies do we make? Oh, I don't know. Louis L'Amour's got a freaking 100 books of Westerns. You could just make adaptations of those.
Yeah, true.
That'd be the perfect place to start.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Wow, we've been talking for an hour. Wow.
Mm.
All right. Want to wrap it up?
I'll let you do the outro.
All right. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Crossblades podcast, where we talk about faith, pop culture, and everything else in between. I am Nico Wolfie, and this is Samick Productions. We'll see you guys in the next episode. See ya.